My editor caught me in my sewing room making denim shopping bags for the local Aldi's or Rulers stores near us. These are for my daughter-in-law. My son just retired from the military, and they're waiting for their house to close, and they're staying with us for that time, and I've been busy trying to get some things done in my sewing area. I had a stack of denim jeans, and I decided it was time to do something with them. The bags are quite big, and my son caught me on the third one while I was working on it, and he said, "You should make a video." So I'm going to show you how I make my denim shopping bags. By the way, these will hold about 2 dozen cans of veggies. They're big enough to hold 3 or 4 bags of chips, boxes. They go a long ways, and it's nice to only have 3 or 4 bags to carry out instead of 10 or 15 like you get at Walmart. Anyway, I'm going to show you how to do this. I usually just use the legs for making the market bags. The rest of it I turn into something else, but this is a pair that obviously had a blowout in the knee. You can see where it ripped across. I would patch it, but the fabric is too worn, and if I tried to patch it, it would just break again. For whatever reason, they seem to wear one knee more than the other one. The other knee is just fine. But what I do, the first thing is I remove this seam here. I just cut it off. Real simple. Just take your scissors, run it down, cut that seam off. I don't want to incorporate this, and the inseam is this part that is not as flat as the rest of it. Anyway, just cut it out, and when you finish cutting the inseam out, there it is. Then you cut the hem off. This is very worn fabric, you can see that, and it's not going to make a good market bag, so we're going to remove it. Anyway, since this has some very worn fabric, this market bag won't be as big as the others, but it'll still make a nice market bag. Maybe for canned goods. So I'm just going to cut the really worn fabric off. Just do it freehand. And we will use that to size our bag. Now, if you look at these, what I have, it's bigger at one side than it is at the other side. And if I were to just sew them both together like that, matching up the seams, I would have kind of a funnel shaped bag, and I don't want that. So what I do, and you have to, I'm going to have to size this one too. Let me do that and I'll be back. They have to be about the same size. So I'm going to match them up. And get them about the same size, and maybe straighten up this edge here. There we go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to twist them like this, so that I now have a tube, more or less a tube and not a funnel. So I'm going to stitch it here and on the other side, and I'll be right back. I have sewn the first seam here, and I used my serger. I just like the seams finished. If you don't have a serger, you might have a zigzag, and you can zigzag the seam. That's optional. But I like to lay that seam down along with these other seams. I'll just simply stitch them down from the back side so that they do not get caught when you're loading them up with groceries. I'll do that and I'll be right back. I finished all of those seams, and I have one nice big long piece that I can fold in half. But what I want to do is I want to decide which edge is going to be my top. And I usually just pick the straightest edge after looking at it. And I'm going to take this to the serger. Now, if you don't have a serger, you can just use a zigzag. And I'm going to serge it. I'll be right back. It's all nicely finished. My serger will sew this fabric, but it will not cut those big seams. I don't know about your serger, but don't try to cut those big seams with your serger. Anyway, so I've got one approximately rectangle, and I'm going to fold it and do my next seam. Now, these are not even. You can see that. They're different sizes. This is the bottom of the leg. This is the top of the leg. And I have flipped them. So I have back and forth. So I have a top, a bottom, a top, a bottom. And that way it's approximately square when I finish. See, it's bigger on one side than it is in the other. So we'll finish this seam, and that's because I flipped them so that we don't have a funnel. We'll have a rectangle. All right, last seam. Now I'm going to open that seam up and lay it down flat and stitch it down. And I'll be right back. Okay, we're all finished. We got all of our seams laying down nicely. This is going to be a little shorty bag. I'm sure she'll find something to put in it. Our next job is to turn our top down. And basically we want about that much, a little over an inch, maybe an inch and a half. I could measure it. Okay, it is an inch and a half or thereabouts. I don't normally measure this. I've done so many of them. I know what it looks like, but I do pin it because I want them to be pretty uniform all the way around. And it's just easier if you take the time to pin it. And there's some of that worn fabric, but it's going to be on the inside and nobody will ever know. Now I want to match those seams up because it'll pucker on you if you're not careful. Now, when I sew this, I'm going to sew it here, and then I'm going to stitch it right at the top so it doesn't roll on me. I'll do that and be right back. Now, I have the top all neatly finished. You use whatever color thread you want. In this case, I've got red. It doesn't match anything on the original denim jeans, but I have none of those seams on from the original denim jeans. So what you want to do next is you want to decide where you want your center to be. I don't want these seams to be all the way to the edge, because when I finish the bottom, they're going to get in my way. So what I want is I want those bottom jean, the bottom, the leg part, to be in the middle. It just seems to work out better that way. Anyway, so I'm going to mark these with a pin, okay, because I'm going to need that pin later. And then I'm going to pin it here so that this is even. And then I'm going to find my bottom. Okay. And as you can see, I didn't cut that off real evenly, and that's okay. Let's see what they look like. I could take a ruler and even it up if I wanted, or I can just look at it and eyeball it, which is what I'll probably do. Remember, we're making a bag to take to the grocery store and fill with canned goods. It doesn't have to be extremely pretty. It should be serviceable, and that's what we're aiming for. And it looks like I got this one really off, but not by too much, just a little bit. I'm going to even the bottom up a little bit so it's a little more square. There we go. I'm going to take a handful of pins and I'm going to pin it. Now, this is just to keep my seam halfway decent. Okay. Now, we're just going to stitch straight across the bottom. Don't need to back stitch because we're going to cut those corners off eventually. Check the other side, make sure I caught everything, and I did, and I'm going to stitch it again. This is just to make sure it holds. Now, looks good. I'm going to trim this because I'm going to take this to my serger, and my serger will not trim these big denim pieces. I'm going to serge the bottom, and I'll be right back. Okay, here we go. Now, what I want to do is I want to find my side here, and I'm going to mark it with a pin, okay, because I'm going to have to find this point to make a nice, neat boxed edge. Here we go. Now we're going to box it, and to box it we're going to have to reach in, and we're going to open our seam up down here with our hand, and we're going to lie it flat, and we're going to feel, and we're going to line this pin up with that seam, and we're going to pin it here, and pin it there. Make sure that seam is lined up. I don't know if you can see it, but it needs to line up with that pin we put in there. And I'm going to remove the pin and pin it again. I'm going to do that on the other side, and I'll show you what we do next. Okay, we're going to box our corner. Now, because this is a little shorter than the other bags, I'm going to make a smaller box here so it won't be too short. I have a tool that I use in quilting. It's called Lipfa Square. But if you don't have one of these, you can literally take any kind of paper or whatever and mark it so that you get the square point. On this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up this line here, because this is a 45 here, and a 45 here. Going to line it up. I think probably about 3.5 inches is what I want over here. Okay, and I have a pin. Someplace I have a pin, a pin, a pin, a pin. And I'm just going to take my ballpoint pen. I have both my corners stitched, and all I need to do now is leave a little bit of a seam edge and clip them off. Now, clipping them off is optional. I just like to clip them off. Do it on both sides. And then I'm going to take this to my serger and I'm going to finish this edge. And I'll be right back. Okay, our next job is to find the middle here. So when we put our handles on, they will be in the middle according to where our boxes are. So those pins that we put on when we decided where the sides were, we're going to use to decide where the middle is. And here we go. On both sides. Now we need to mark for our handles. We haven't made our handles yet. See, we got a nice little bag here. We're going to mark for our handles. And to do that, I use my same little thing. I want my handles about 5 inches apart. That seems to be a fairly comfortable distance. So I line the 2.5 inch line up there. I mark the edge here. And I mark it at 5 inches. Here. Do that on both sides. Once I have it marked, I can remove my pins. There's 2.5. I always check myself, though, to make sure that everything looks correct. So that my lines, there's 2.5, and there's 2.5, and they look pretty much dead on. So now I need to make some handles. Let me show you how I do this. I have some scraps left over from one of the pairs. I also cut squares this size out of those blue jeans, and I make quilts out of them for the guys that I make quilts for. And they're not too crazy about flowery ones, but they do like the denim ones. Anyway, so we need a piece that's pretty, about like that. I'm going to trim this up, and I'm going to try to make a rectangle out of it. Pretty much. It doesn't have to be real straight, because we're going to straighten it up as we go. A piece like that would work. And I have another piece here. Let's see. Now, as I cut this, I'm eyeballing, and I want to make it pretty even. It does not have to be exact. We're making bags to take to the store to fill with groceries. But it is nice if it's fairly even. There we go. 2 handles. 1, 2. Okay. Right side down. We're going to fold it to about 1/3. 1/3, 1/3. We're going to fold it like that. Then we're going to fold it back in on itself like that. We're going to match that up. And if you want, you can pin them. Sometimes I pin, sometimes I don't. And then we're going to go down here, fold it a third, and then roll it in. And because this is not exactly a rectangle, we'll have to play with it a little bit. And the last piece. There we go. One handle. Except I think I need that just a little bit farther in there. All right, we're going to sew it right down through the middle, and I'll be right back. After finishing it down the middle, we're going to run our machine over, and we're going to catch the outside edges, but also. One handle, ready to go on. I'm going to make another one, and I'll be back. Now we have our two handles. We want to make sure that they have nice, neat ends, because we're going to sew them on. Cleaning that up. Cleaning that. Now we're going to line them up, and they need to be exactly the same length. Okay, when I clean that off there, I think we're just about there. They're not exactly identical, but they're close enough. Now, let's put them on our... All right, we've got our marks here. We're going to lay it, we want this part to the outside, so we're going to lay it like that. We're going to put it like this, and I'm going to give it a pin. Now, we're going to sew one at a time. All right, I'm going to sew this way, that way, this way, that way, back and forth, and this way and that way again. So I have two sets of stitches at the top, a diagonal, and this is down. And I've never had one of these break if I put that many stitches in it. The bag will break first before my stitches will break. So let me show you. Across. Diagonal. Up the side. Another diagonal. Whoops, my machine didn't like that. I just bent a needle. If you sew as much as I do, you buy needles in little packets like this with 25 in each. And I usually buy these by the 100. Anyway, we'll get this needle in and I'll be back. And I'm back. As you can see, you must be careful when you're sewing through these heavy, heavy denim jeans. Sometimes your needles, you just got to take it easy. We'll do this a little bit slower here. There we go. If you noticed, you always turn your machine off when you replace a needle. You don't want to get a finger caught while you're doing that. If you accidentally hit the foot feed. Over. And here we go. Last one. Across here again. Now that's across all those seams, so we'll be very careful here. Oh, broke a thread. What is going on here? When you're sewing your handles on, make sure they look like this. Don't give them a twist. Anyway, our bag is finished, and it's just a matter of turning it right side out and putting it to use. This is a little shorter than the other two, but I think it will get lots of use. It's probably about the size of one of those that you would buy at Walmart. There's our little bag. Now, talk about green. Made out of recycled blue jeans. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and I'll be back with another one.